Okay, welcome to the Caribbean and beyond. I am your host, Emmanuel Paul, and today we will delve into the ongoing conversation about the situation in Haiti, which is currently grappling with severe political and security crisis. And joining us to discuss the crucial situation in Haiti is Mr. Kit Mines, is the acting vice president at the United States Institute for Peace, USIP, and is also the director for Latin America, overseeing the region such as Haiti, El Salvador, and other countries in the region. He has an extensive diplomatic and military career. Mr. Mines has a lot of knowledge in Haiti with about 33 years and working as a diplomat in the region and other countries. And with him, we are going to discuss the situation in Haiti and other related topic. Mr. Mines, it's a pleasure to have you. How are you doing?
Great. It's good to be here. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me again.
Is there anything I'm missing in your introduction? I understand you have additional titles since last time we spoke.
I'm actually no longer acting vice president. I'm the vice president, so
Oh,
that's something. But no,
oh,
we at USIP were involved in a number of the crises in the hemisphere. Venezuela is one of the ones that we follow very closely, along with Haiti, and then Colombia. We have a very active team, so we've got our fingers on the pulse of many different parts of the hemisphere. Concerned about Ecuador now. Ecuador is now in a very tense moment with these recent attacks by the gangs. So, but Haiti remains our focus. That's the place that we still feel in the next year it's either going to get a lot better or a lot worse, and we'd like to be on the side that helps it get better.
congratulations on your new position. So does that mean you are no longer working on Latin America or you still hold both titles?
No, so it's just vice president for Latin America now. I just the one title covering the whole hemisphere.
Oh, okay, I understand. So,
Yeah.
since we last spoke about Haiti, there has been a lot of change. The United Security Council of the United Nations approved the multinational force to Haiti, which should be deployed next month, according to the authorities in Kenya. What do you have in terms of update about this special force? Do you have additional information about them?
Well, one thing I would say up front, let me draw attention, if I could, to the event that we held at USIP on the 14th of December. You can find that on our website. It was a very good event where we brought together four of the previous special representatives of the UN Secretary General. We had Ambassador Terhorst, Ambassador Moulet, Ambassador Lalim, and Ambassador Valdez. So they covered 30 years, frankly, worth of, not the entire 30 years, but they hit different periods of the last 30 years of peacekeeping and multinational security and support forces in Haiti. It was a very good event. It's available online now, the recording. If you're doing the English version, you go to the audio so you can get the translation of the French remarks. But very good event that I would draw people's attention to. And it was basically asking the question of these former leaders of peacekeeping missions in Haiti, compared to what they had, what did they have to work with? So think about what they were able to achieve, and frankly, it was more than they have been given credit for. We have been given credit for collectively, I think, in many cases. But given how challenging it was, even with all the resources they had, what's it going to be like now with a much reduced footprint and force and capacity? So it's a very good event. I think you'll find some good tidbits there that help to guide understanding of what the Kenyans are going to be up against. As I understand it, they're still developing the force. The ambassador of Kenya to the OAS spoke at this event. They're still absolutely confident about their ability to conduct this mission, but they're also very realistic that they have gotten only a fraction of the other forces that they were hoping for and that they need. So there's still a big gap, I think, in the size of the force. These former SRSGs, we call them, special representatives, they all pointed to a number of the capacities that will be missing in this force, and they recommended that there be some creativity applied in finding these other things that'll be helpful. A rapid reaction force in case there's trouble somewhere that some contingent needs some help. They need help with intelligence, which the Spanish did in MINUSTA. So they need help with connecting to the communities. And both on the human rights front, one of the SRSGs recommended something like the MISIV force. That was a human rights observer mission that went alongside one of the earlier missions that Ambassador Terhorst mentioned. They will need logistical and other support, some air support, so they can get around the country. Anyway, there's a lot of things that are still to be developed, and I think that's where they're leaving it. The Kenyans are very generous and very capable in offering to lead this force and to have the core of the force from Kenya, but they need help from others, and I think that's still a gap that remains to be filled. Some of these special capacities, and then also the ability to just have the coverage. And just one final thing, they all talked about the training of the Ashenpe, the Haitian National Police, that there is just a need for a more robust mission that would train and mentor and accompany the HNP as they get stood up again. And it's frustrating because it feels like we've been through this before, but
there have been a lot of discussion about what would be the role, the responsibility of this force. I think Kenyan authorities said they were going to help securing, public building, but the problem is not like security to public offices. It's like the people who have been victimized every single day. So do you have a clearer understanding of what would be the focus of the force, the mission? Do you have a clear definition of what will they doing?
I think that's still to be determined. I mean, the mandate is quite broad. It's not only to protect infrastructure, obviously, it's also within the mandate, there's a clear indication of being able to train and equip and to empower the HNP. So they have that, and that would, I think by definition, to be effective, it would require them to deploy mentors and trainers out with the HNP as they go back and reestablish themselves. They have within the mandate the ability to directly confront the gangs when necessary. I don't think that's what they're planning to do from day one, is just go in and, guns blazing, try to contain the gangs. And there's actually a lot smarter ways to do that. So they have a broad mandate. I think part of it is going to depend on how much support they get. I mean, if they come in with just 1,000 from them and a few hundred from elsewhere, then there will be very tight limits to what they can do. So I think they would like to be as expansive and as helpful as they can. And I think they know that there's a need to not just protect infrastructure, but to reestablish security broadly. They certainly have, taken up the challenge conceptually. Now, I think, again, it depends on the resources that they will be given and the other forces that will be joining them and how big that is, that will determine whether and how much they can do.
You insisted on the number of either military or police officer that will be deployed, but we haven't seen like a lot of countries committing to send troops, like Canada, the US, and I heard like Jamaica said they might send about 300. So far, we don't know how many of police officers, how many military soldiers that the force will have. Why do you think, even after the Security Council approved the resolution, but we still don't have a commitment from like most of the countries and the core group like the US, Canada, France that says they are going to send troops, and it seems like sending troops to Haiti is not something that US and Canada have on their mind right now. What is your understanding of that?
Well, no, that's absolutely true. The U.S. and Canada would definitely rather not send any troops or police for this mission. It's just where they are right now. Not something that either country is willing to do or enthusiastic about. So I think the trick is still how to build this force without the U.S. and Canada. I think that's hard to do because the U.S. urging from behind is not really an effective way to build a force. If the U.S. were to commit a small contingent to the mission, I think it would draw in a lot of other contingents. But as it is, it's basically urging others to do what the U.S. is not willing to do. So that's a hard sell. Canada the same way. The Canadians are also very reticent for some reason to anything on the ground, and it's unlike any other mission that I think we've ever seen in Haiti. There's always been a core contingent from the U.S. and Canada, even a small number, but at least it showed that commitment. So I don't know all the math and all the politics behind it. I mean, both countries are very concerned about casualties. One has to ask the question, if they're concerned about casualties, then they ought to be just as concerned about the casualties of other countries. So it's not like some are less important than others. So anyway, it's not really a cohesive coalition right now. Again, God bless the Kenyans for being willing to do this, and they do seem very enthusiastic about it. Frankly, would be the word I would use. They're very committed to it, I guess, a better word.
Yeah, but even with the numbers, Mr. Mines, without like the technology, the military capabilities that the US and Canada has in terms of how well trained officers, how can they assist like uh technical support. So this mission might, like the other mission that were in Haiti, that they might fail because they don't have the technological support. We understand in Haiti right now, the gang members, they reinforce their technological capabilities in terms like installing drones and other things. And without the United States and Canada and France, I'm not saying Kenya doesn't have technology capabilities to deal with that, but uh, it will be a huge problem for the multinational force without this possibility.
Yeah, that discussion happened on the 14th as well at the meeting that we held at USIP. You'll see that in the video. Most of the SRSGs and the Haitian representative that was there as well, they all talked about the need for what I would just call coercive force, a force that is strong enough and compelling enough and intimidating enough that you don't have to confront the gangs on the street because they're basically afraid of this force. And if it doesn't have that, it is going to be, I think, a lot harder. There's a question here between military and police, and there's an effort to make this an all police force. That may or may not work. If it is to work, it would have to have some carabinieri, if we can call them that, type police that are, and the Kenyans are bringing in a unit that is actually, it's a rural, kind of a heavy police force. It's not, constabularies on the streets of a city. They are used to working in a environment. So they have some heavy capacity, but you'll need that. You'll need the mobility. You're right. Drones would be very useful, would be very intimidating right now. Some have talked about AC-130 gunships. That's a very effective air platform that is used in counterinsurgency that I think just its very presence, knowing that it's in the sky and has eyes on everything, that would be very effective. So there's a number of these things. I wouldn't write them out. I don't think all these, nothing's been decided on some of these issues yet. I think they're waiting to see. But there is, I think, a need for that heavier force somewhere, not on the streets, walking through neighborhoods, but certainly knowing that it's in the background and is deployable, I think would be very helpful. And that would provide a kind of an intimidating presence that would put the gangs a bit on their back feet, and they would be more, I think, willing to work with this new situation. There's some that are really concerned that if that's not there, that it really could go badly. If the gangs are not, if they're not in any way intimidated, then they start to confront a lightly armed force. You have a couple of incidents, and things really start to unravel quickly. So
Kenya has there's a lot of criticism from human rights group about how Kenya is operating, even in Kenya, where there's a lot of acts of human rights violation in other countries as well, where Kenyan military were deployed. With uh, regarding that matter, do you at the USIP, or did you discuss that at the meeting you had on December 14th? How do you think you anticipate that they might dealing with that, like potential human rights violation in Haiti?
so I mean, I would go into this personally with the giving the benefit of the doubt to the Kenyans. And I think their human rights record is actually reasonably good. They've been in a lot of different peacekeeping missions. There have been a few incidents, as there always are, and there have been from the United States and Canada as well. You can look that up, and we've had our share of incidents where a unit operating independently commits human rights violations. Everybody has that. The Kenyans have had some incidents as well, but generally, and they've been involved in a lot of missions, I think their record is actually quite good. So I think they're very cognizant of this. They're very sensitive to this issue. They know that if they lose the support of the population, this is going to be impossible. So I think they're coming in knowing that this is a huge issue. Again, Ambassador Terhorst had a very creative idea that it'd be nice to have human rights monitors that are alongside this mission. Now, this is the kind of thing that in a multinational mission like this, it doesn't really exist. It's something the UN would have or the OAS would have. So it's got to be created in parallel. But that would give them independent reporting, that somebody's connecting with the people and saying, hey, what are the issues with this force? That would be very useful. That's one thing. They can do a lot of that also on their own. And I think they will be coming in. We have been involved in some of the sharing of our lessons learned about justice and security dialogues with communities. And the Kenyan force is actually very, very attuned to that. And they do that quite well. So I think if they come in with that idea that we will establish a dialogue process with these communities where we're deployed, I think that will be could be a very effective way. Now, the bigger thing, again, is how quickly they can work with the Haitian police and the Haitian local forces and help to train and equip and mentor them to where they're the ones that are in their own communities doing these things. And then the other thing I just point out is the more that the less the gangs try to resist, the better this is going to be. And it would be, a full gang strategy is something that they're going to need to develop. All the different ways to deal with these young armed men that are kind of running amok right now. And armed anarchy is what somebody called it. I saw Guy Philippe came back to the country, a crazy thing, but he's already walking around with a bunch of armed guys surrounding him. Well, they're available. I mean, it's like any country with unlimited numbers of young men that have nothing else to do. So there's got to be also a parallel economic strategy, a job strategy. There's a lot of things that have to go alongside just the deployment of a force. And again, that was things that our friends pointed out on the 14th. That was very interesting and very helpful. And they came from I wouldn't say that all of these missions failed. I think that's a false assessment. In fact, the country kind of held together until the UN mission pulled back in 2017 because the US cut funding to it. That's when things really started to unravel. And until then, it was not great, but there was a government. It was functioning and not always good, but adequate and progressing in some ways. So I think we should be fair about what an effective and connected, transparent international force can be helpful with. It's a small force. It's not coming in to take over the country. It's coming in to do a very discrete mission and task that just gives enough support to the democratic forces and to communities that they can push back against this anarchy and chaos and the real viciousness that these gangs have unleashed.
And another parameter of this, Mr. Mines, is the political part of the security crisis. We
Mm.
understand there are a lot of concern, a lot of accusation of like how the government might use, gang members to do violent acts on their behalf, and even like the State Department sanction a lot of people, even current and former elected officials or other government officials in Haiti who are using the gang to, put chaos in the country. So how can we prevent that? Like the mission is going, but they are going to do to protect the very people who are used to like are using the gang. There are at least three members of the current government that was on the previous list published by Canada recently for their alleged involvement in financing gang violence. So the fear now is the multinational force is going to protect the very people who used to finance the gang, and uh now they are taking advantage of their own actions. How can we prevent that? I'm not inviting you to comment on allegations, but those are the fact that Canada, US section, a lot of them, and the government hasn't get rid of all of the people who fell under the sanctions. How can we uh, prevent the situation like the multinational forces going, but they're going to protect like people who
Mhm.
has past involvement in financing gang members?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And that goes to something that I think the strongest of our guests, I keep referring back to it, but it was a very good event on the 14th, was Ambassador Valdez from Chile. He was the SRSG before the earthquake. He is the strongest on this, but very clear. And the others agree as well, but he was the one that I think put it in the clearest terms. And that was that there has to be a political strategy alongside the security strategy. Let me just cover one big issue and then I'll get to the issue that you addressed. So the big issue is whether there's a transparent, reasonably popular, at least legitimate government for this force to work with. His concern is, and some of the others as well, is that if it's not legitimately accepted by the Haitian people, and there is an incident, which invariably there will be something where the multinational force has a shootout with somebody and somebody gets killed. So then the question is, well, who authorized that? Was that authorized within Haiti by a legitimate government? So he's very concerned that unless there's a political reset, as we've been calling it, where this government, the current government that exists now, is not refreshed at a minimum, but given some stronger mandate with the people, more transparent, more inclusive, not just a kind of a single leader that fell into the position, but rather a more comprehensive, at least a negotiating process that involves all the different players in Haiti. Unless that happens, he's concerned that you've got a force coming in that basically, and some have expressed this as well, that's propping up a government that is not entirely legitimate or transparent and doesn't have the support of the people. So there's a concern there. The issue about the connections to gangs is one that's been obviously going on for a very long time. That's a very bad habit that Haiti fell into all the way back into the early 2000s, when it was just easier to get a gang than it was to work through the institutions. Actually, it goes even predates that, even to the restoration of democracy in the mid 90s. That was something that was just done, and it was very unfortunate. And I think rather than trusting and building the institutions to go, grab a mob for rent or a gang for rent, very, very toxic policy, but it's persisted, and it's been built in now to the political structure of Haiti in a way that's very, very unfortunate, and I think hard to break. But I think that through sanctions, through some really direct diplomacy, I think there's ways to pull that back enough that it is, if not totally eliminated, at least it's pulled back to a place where it's not a direct issue in the day-to-day politics. So there's a couple of things in play there. The point again is that there's going to need to be a political process, not only leading up to the deployment, that again strengthens and makes more transparent, more inclusive the current government, but also a really strong diplomatic effort from there that would involve the UN, the OAS, bilateral people like the US and Canada and France and Chile and Mexico and others that are active in Haiti and CARICOM. There's got to be a real active kind of day-to-day coordination on the diplomatic things that reinforce these sorts of things, that it's not acceptable to be funding a gang and certainly not to be empowering a gang that is going to be detrimental to this deployment and to the course that the international community has taken. That needs to just be made very clearly on the ground and from capitals. So there's a big diplomatic lift, frankly, that's going to have to accompany this as well. Very active diplomacy. It doesn't mean anyone's running the country. It just means that they're trying to provide those guardrails so that when there's an actor that really goes rogue, there's something to hem them in and to convince them, sometimes quite persuasively, to put country ahead of personal fortunes and personal power. And that'll be a daily scrum. It's just something that every day is going to need to be active. There's not a mechanism that just fixes that. It's something that just comes out day to day in the diplomacy and the statecraft as it plays out within Haiti.
One of the requirement Kenya's government has is that there is a consensus between political and civil society in Haiti. They would not send troops before there's this such a consensus. But so far, there's no such consensus, and the current government is very reluctant to share the power with other people or even finding a consensus like for the benefit of the country. Do you at the USIP think there is a possibility there might be a broader consensus before the deployment of the first contingent in Haiti?
Well, there's been a number of efforts to make this work. I mean, the last one, of course, was the CARICOM effort. There was 4 or 5 rounds of that. They did their last round of discussions in mid-December. There's really one issue that remains, and that is whether Prime Minister Henry stays or goes. And that's the issue that everyone in these talks, as I understand it, is stuck on. Obviously, his faction and his people would like for him to stay, and the Montana group in particular is insisting that he needs to go. There was a kind of a hybrid proposal that we saw in the fall that was put forward, I believe, by members of the Montana group that was very interesting. And it was a kind of a hybrid where it would go back to the 2006, I think it was, Council of Sages their Council of Presidents or Sages that was used to reset the government at that time after the departure of President Aristide. And that was I thought that was a very coherent kind of clean way to do it, where there was, a number of the country's notables were appointed to this council, and then from that they selected, I think it was the prime minister, who then reset the government. So that was one way to do it. It was not perfect, but it wasn't bad, and that got the country the stability that it needed to get to an election. So that's kind of what one proposal that's on the table would do now. But again, that would require the prime minister to step back, and I think it's been not something that he has been willing to do up until now. I don't think there's been an insistence on the part of the key players like the United States that this is something that just needs to happen. I think it's been kind of leaving this in what has come to be known as the Haitian solution. And so there's been mediators like
Well,
CARICOM.
but excuse me if I interrupt you on that. The State Department always say it's up to the Haitian people, but we understand in Haiti nothing is possible without the State Department, and there's no solution. They are the one who will be imposing the solution, unfortunately. Like with Ariel Henry, the UN Special Envoy and to Haiti right now, uh, she said that there's only one person, the core group, like the United Nations understand, like that would govern the country until the election is we organize election. It should be up to Ariel. And we on one hand, and the other hand, they say, oh, it's up to the Asian people. But if it is for the Asian people, why don't they let the Asian people decide? And Ariel and Wish is very unpopular in Haiti right now after more than 2 years. But it seems like core group, United States, Canada, United Nations, they are very comfortable with him, and they are not willing to accept any other solution that is not included, Ariel, anyway.
Well, so that you're right. That's another divide, I think, between the different approaches to this. One is that there needs to be a reset to the transitional government. That was the proposal from the fall, that would have a council of sages. They would then select a prime minister who would choose the government. And in that proposal, just to finish that, there would be an inclusion of Prime Minister Henry and his people, his party, his followers. They would have a part of that, but they wouldn't be the single leader of it the way he is now. So that was one option. The other option is to stay with the current prime minister and the government such as it exists until there's an election. So that is the other option. And I know a number of persons in the international community support that, only because they think that there's not time for a transition. They think it would be disruptive. And so they would say, as weak as the current government is, at least it is a government that could be worked with to get to an election, which some believe could happen as early as this year, and probably in December, not late December, but early December. So that's another way of doing it. My own view is that the transitional government reset would be superior, just because I think it's been 2.5 years with a non-elected and frankly not even a negotiated government. I mean, to at least build that out with inclusion of the Montana group and the other players and more civil society, I think would be the way to go. But that's one option. The other is, a third option, I guess, would be a kind of a December 21 agreement that actually functions. I mean, you have the December 21 accord that we supported at one point as a pretty good option. Architecturally, it's got all the different pieces that you would want for a transitional government. But the problem was it just didn't function. The prime minister's office really didn't feel compelled to allow any power sharing. So the third option, one would be a reset, two would be just stick with what we have until the election. Third would be the December 21 accord that has some reinforcement, and it compels the current government to share power. And that could be the council, the High Council of Transition, as it is now, with 3 people, could be 5. That's another option that's been on the table, frankly, for almost a year now. So that would be another way. And then there would be some kind of an enforced power sharing mechanism where they are not just advisors that can be ignored, but the HCT would be something real, something that does in fact share power, even if the prime minister is, conducting the day-to-day work of government. They would have a say in ministers and in building out the electoral arrangements and whatnot. So those are the kind of the options. But now back to your original question, I do tend to agree that the U.S. is going to have to would have to weigh in on one of the options, or at least on a facilitation of a process that would get the right players together to make this decision, but without the option of not making a decision. And I think that's what's really been killing us for the last 2.5 years, is there's always an option to not do it.
Last month, Ambassador Greenfield at the UN Security Council suggested there should be a new transition for 18 months. But the problem is there's no election without trust, and it's sad, nobody trusts Ariel Henry to do, fair and good election right now. So there is a risk that we going deeper into the crisis should the election is not fair and Ariel Henry stay in power, and then the election is not accepted. So now we have a longer crisis that would depend. So how could we avoid that, knowing Haitian is more than 2 years? The Montana group, they have their own problem. I don't think they might be able to do the transition on their own, but at least they had all the organization that were able to come together to propose something. But it seems like the US is like for the option that keep Ariel Henry for about 18 months and uh, until we get another elections, which would be another problem, and then we will be like the crisis will keep deepening and deepening further.
Yeah, I mean, I do think so that the option of going to an early election, I guess it could be 18 months, but some think it could be 12, not even 12, 11 at this point, I think is one that could be considered. Again, I think that's very quick to hold an election. I think you're right that it would require more than that. And it would especially require the reestablishment of security. So there's always a chicken and egg question here. Which came first, chicken or the security or politics? And again, Ambassador Valdez in our event was very clear that they have to go hand in hand. There's not a sequencing. They both have to go together. There has to be a reset of some sort where there's a capable government to deal with. There's a legitimate government to enforce the mandate of this new security force and to build out the infrastructure for an election. So that he would say that's essential. I tend to agree that there is a need for a fresh reset to this government, whatever it ends up being. And then from that, you've got the infrastructure both for the security force to support them and also for the election. I don't think muddling through just for lack of imagination, not wanting to get involved. We're kind of playing this a little disingenuously because we're saying, well, it's a Haitian solution, but the U.S. has already tipped the scales in favor of one party right now and is enforcing that. So it's a little disingenuous to say we'd like a Haitian solution, but in a situation that the United States has already tipped the balance. So I think it's you can't have it both ways. If the U.S. really wants to allow for a process that is Haitian-led, it would probably at this point need to facilitate that very directly, along with CARICOM, along with the other advisors from outside from Intermediate and others that have been involved, and to build out a process that could now be used to finally close the deal between these different options and get all the players together one last time to make a decision and to then make it stick. And that would require a commitment that it does need to come out, and the U.S. will support that. And that would be a Haitian solution.
Do you think there is such a possibility that the U.S. supports something that does not include Ariel Henry? The December 21st accord expired, but they could not renew or find any other thing. Do you think there is a possibility there would be some policy change, like from the State Department standpoint, so they might finally come to realize there's no solution possible with Prime Minister Ariel, and they installed 2 years ago, but he's not even like capable of doing anything. Do you think there's a possibility there might be an evolution on the support for Mr. Henry so they might get for a border solution between like Haitian political and civil societies?
Yeah, I mean, and that's where the December 21 Accord, again, the way it's designed is actually quite interesting because it has the inclusion of civil society in these roundtables that are conducted. It's got, the HCT on paper looks good. It's got 3 people. It could have 5. It could have 7. And that then becomes very close to that Council of Sages. If that becomes a 5 or 7 person body, they then could select one among them, or they could even rotate it, who is the acting president. And if that then restores presidential power on the level that it is constitutionally established, the prime minister then goes back to being the prime minister, and they share power. So that's something that I wouldn't write off. I think that could be done, but it's going to have to be enforced. It's not something that anybody is going to just volunteer to do. You know how power is in Haiti. People are quite anxious to assume power and quite reluctant to give it up. So that's going to have to be enforced quietly. Doesn't mean that anyone's getting bossed around. It just means that the international community, in an effort to be helpful, is going to again provide the guardrails for the best deal we can get in a democratic context right now. So that would require a little bit more. I think the U.S. would have to pivot away from this, 2.5 year now allowance for a quote unquote Haitian solution, which I think is no closer now than it was 2.5 years ago. So it would require a bit more energy and reinforcement by the United States, I think, for that to work.
Do you think, Mr. Mines, the situation in the Middle East right now and other Ukraine and other countries there that might have an impact on how soon things move, like to Haiti, because the US is so busy uh finding an agreement, like preventing the war in the Middle East from spreading? Do you think that might have an impact on Haiti in terms of how the situation get involved to sending the troops and in finding an agreement between political parties in Haiti?
Well, I mean, the work that needs to be done would not in any way be detracted by what's going on in the Middle East. If anything, there's an argument that it would be enhanced in the sense that how many crises do we want to handle at the same time? And if Haiti is in a constant state of collapse and crisis, there is actually one scenario worse than the one we have now, and that is, of course, a coup by the gangs that topples the government altogether. So, do you really want that as a possible outcome? So with minimal cost, minimal resources, and people that frankly, not like these people would be working on the Middle East if they weren't working on Haiti. That is their place to work. So I think there's an argument that the effort could be put into this. It's just been a reluctance to do so for not wanting to be blamed for it. In fairness, there is a very constant drumbeat of anti-foreign intervention in Haiti, and one gets that from inside the country and from a lot in the United States as well. So there's a real just resistance to this, and a sense that nothing ever works. Again, I think really misguided assessment. But so I don't think that it should. I mean, we were no more energetic 2 years ago, way before the October 7th attacks in Gaza. So it's not like we've been, distracted by other things. There's the means to do it. The one thing I would say, though, there's a funding issue. I don't know how this is going to play out, but the funding package that was requested, I think, was $200 million, $100 million from Department of Defense drawdown, and then $100 million from other foreign assistance funding. So that it's not a lot of money, but by global standards and by U.S. standards, but it's not nothing. And I think as they go through the budget talks they're going through now, I mean, there is a chance that number would not be hit. So that's another thing that's kind of important. I think the Kenyans would be relying on that $100 million that would come from, it's Department of Defense drawdown, they call it. It doesn't mean they're directly drawing down equipment from bases and depots across the country, but it means there's Department of Defense money that would be involved for some things, and then foreign assistance money, presumably to help with the Kenyan force and police training and all the rest. If that money doesn't come through, then we are again back to a very smaller mission, underfunded and under-resourced. So that could play out, and that is one thing that would be affected by the Middle East and by Ukraine, because this, there's a lot more money going into those places. But again, this is not nothing. So $200 million in a situation where there's fights over how long to go on with Ukraine funding and how much to continue to fund Israel in what is becoming a very unpopular war in the United States. This could be something that they get caught up in.
Given your experience working in the region, in Haiti especially, uh, is the USIP intend to play a role during this transition, the deployment of the force, like a direct role, sending observers to Haiti to see how things are moving, or how you can talk with the State Department to participate in the discussion?
Well, the things that we do, I think that could be helpful, that are available, and some of these we'll do on our own. Some of it we would do in coordination with the State Department. We're doing some analytical work on gangs, on how to develop a gang strategy. So that's one thing that we'll have and we'll publish in the next 2 or 3 months. So I think just, again, looking at ways, how do you work with these gangs without just coming in guns blazing? I mean, there's a lot of other components to this. What was the motivation for these kids to join the gangs? What's their price for doing something else? And there's based on all the work we've done around the region on gangs, and a lot of us have done this around the world. So that's one thing. The gangs, we're trying to be helpful just on the strategic side of how to develop a good campaign strategy for this. Again, taking into account the economic component, the gang component, the political, and all the rest. So trying to pull all of this together in a way that clarifies what's required. And then the thing that I think we do the best is our justice and security dialogues, and we have some things on our website that talk about that. We did a very good program in Colombia where we went into the areas that the FARC had abandoned at the end of the peace process. They laid down their weapons, but they had actually been governing these places. So they were kind of without governance, and the police, the military came in, and there was just a need to help connect them to the citizens. So we have a process and training and manuals and things that we have developed for these justice and security dialogues. That's been a very good thing that we've offered. We've done this with the Kenyans as well, and shared our experiences with them. So there's a number of those sorts of things that I think could be helpful. And then on the political side, we're always available with good offices to try to help close some of the political gaps. We certainly listen to all the different voices, both here and in Haiti, and try to offer advice and wherever it's helpful from the experience that we have in other peace processes and other negotiations. We have a negotiation team that's very good at this and know the ins and outs of negotiations. So without overselling, on the margins of everything, we are certainly available and hopeful that we can be helpful. And then we do a lot of policy work.
So, Mr. Mites, let's get back for one last time on the Prime Minister, and there are more and more former U.S. diplomats that raise their voice, like to denounce. The latest one was Patrick Gaspard, who so far was silent about the Haitian government. And on a podcast a couple months ago, he pointed that Ariel Henry was involved in the President Moises assassination. And again, I'm not inviting you to speculate because he hasn't been indicted in anything. But so far, US keep, supporting him despite all of this serious allegation. I read yesterday that the chair of the GOP in Florida, just for an accusation of sexual assault, which is very serious, and then very quickly they get rid of them. So it seems like there's the double standard in the US when it comes to third world country like Haiti. There's something that is not tolerable in the US, but in Haiti we can impose it to the people, and that's our understanding in Haiti. And you get that question very often. But why do you think like so many former ambassadors are willing now to wade in Ariel Henry potential participation in President Morsis assassination?
Yeah, I just don't know anything about that, so I won't. It's not only that I don't want to share it, I don't know anything to share. I have not followed that closely. I'm frankly independent of whatever those accusations are. It's more about just, being a leader that fell into the position 2.5 years ago in what was really almost a bureaucratic fluke. I mean, it was, just happened to be the person that was in that position literally, I guess, days earlier, weeks earlier, ahead of the assassination, fell into that, and then has not had to face any process that would bring in the other players. So I would base it on that alone. I just think I think it's harder for him to govern without that some process of legitimization. And I think without that, it's going to again be harder for this whole mission to be effective and productive. So I would take it on that alone, independent of the other stuff. And again, just really, I think, urge some kind of a process that that refreshes that government. It could still include him or some of his people, or there'd have to be a space for them. You don't want to exclude anyone, but right now, more people are excluded than included in the government, so it's a real problem. But something that would allow for that to come in. Now, I think the Montana group is going to have to compromise. They're not going to like. They've kind of laid down the marker that anything that retains Henri in any capacity is off the table. I think they're going to have to accept that he will have some role, and it's going to be an awkward period. But the sooner that's done, the sooner the clock starts ticking on an election. And nobody's even talking about an election now because we're waiting on the next big thing, the deployment of the Kenyans and the next round of the CARICOM talks, and there's always something. But let's get that government to a place where it is as good as it gets. People are satisfied, not happy, but satisfied. And then from there, the clock starts ticking on an election, and maybe it could be done this year. But even if in the middle of 2025, that's okay. That gives you some breathing space to get the economy functioning again, security reset, all these things functioning again, to where there's not going to be just a constant grind that really hollows things out. If I could make one further pitch, and this will be coming up in February, we've announced, and it's on our website, the Women Building Peace Award, and one of the runners up was Dr. Deschamps from Haiti, and she's a very dynamic peace builder and humanitarian that will be coming to Washington in February. We'll do a ceremony and some programs. She'll be in Miami and also in Washington in February. Maybe we can talk about Boston too. But anyway, she'll be here for a week of programs, and just wanted to draw attention to that. It's an award that we give every year to one woman and then another 4 runners up, and she was one of the runners up. Phenomenal symbol of peace and community involvement and courage that we will be drawing attention to.
And lastly, 3 recommendations right now. Someone call you, give us 3 recommendations in Haiti right now. Let's say Kenya and State Department, and we would like to do good in Haiti, not missing this momentum. What would you say?
I would say get this political thing reset, get the political process to a better place. I would say do a campaign plan that outlines what needs to be done to reset security, and then make sure you have all the components to do that. And I would say include Haitians every step of the way in the strategy, in the planning, in everything, and with an eye to rebuilding the security force and to providing those guardrails on the political process that allows Haitian voices to not only be heard, but to be effective. I think they're being heard all we need right now, but they're not necessarily effectively being channeled. So provide the guardrails and the process where those voices actually yield a decision and don't just yield more of the same frozen kind of thing that we've had up until now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mainz. It was a pleasure to have you.
Great, good to be here, and thank you, and thanks for the work you do. It's really tremendous to have that voice in the diaspora and back into Haiti as well. You've done a tremendous job of getting different voices in the mix of these decisions. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.